On September 17, 1982, 15-month-old Chelsea McClellan is brought into Dr. Kathleen Holland's pediatric clinic in Kerrville, Texas, for a routine follow-up visit after standard childhood immunizations administered weeks earlier. Nurse Jean Jones takes the child into a small, brightly lit examination room, projecting a crisp and professional demeanor. Moments later, the infant begins seizing and goes into sudden, unexplainable respiratory arrest. Jones steps into the role of the heroic medical professional, attempting resuscitation while shouting for the doctor's assistance down the narrow clinic hallway. It is a terrifying medical emergency that seems to materialize out of thin air, shattering the nerves of the child's mother and the clinic staff. Despite the chaotic and desperate life-saving efforts, the infant's condition deteriorates in seconds on the examination table. This is the exact moment a supposedly safe medical environment is revealed to be a lethal trap. The orchestrated crisis encapsulates a predator hiding behind a starched white uniform, creating life or death emergencies simply to command the room and be worshipped as a savior. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, San Antonio, Texas, was a sprawling metropolis where the humid air hung heavy over sun-baked suburban neighborhoods and concrete highways. At the heart of the medical district stood the Bexar County Hospital, a towering fortress of modern medicine that served as a critical care hub for countless local families. The pediatric intensive care unit was located deep within the labyrinthine corridors of the hospital building, isolated behind heavy double doors that opened with a sharp, metallic hiss. Inside this specialized wing, the atmosphere was a stark contrast to the chaotic emergency rooms below, characterized by the rhythmic hum of ventilators, the sterile scent of rubbing alcohol, and the faint glow of fluorescent lights bouncing off polished linoleum floors. Dedicated medical professionals worked without pause in this closed environment, navigating the narrow spaces between rows of steel cribs and towering intravenous stands to heal critically ill children. It was a place designed to preserve life, a sanctuary where parents surrendered control to the expertise of doctors and nurses. To access the innermost pediatric ward staff, and visitors had to pass a central nursing station that offered a panoptic view of every patient room, ensuring no child was ever out of sight. The architecture itself was intended to foster absolute safety and constant vigilance over the most vulnerable patients in the county. Behind this facade of security, the very systems designed to monitor the children provide the perfect camouflage for an unseen threat. The pristine white walls and strict sanitary protocols created a false sense of absolute protection. No one entering those heavy doors could have imagined that the clinical perfection hid a terrifying reality. For the families of Bexar County, the hospital staff represented absolute salvation during their darkest hours. Mothers like Petty McClellan and the parents of 25-month-old Dorelia Rios were regular. Hard-working citizens raising their children in quiet neighborhoods filled with the deafening hum of summer cicadas and the glow of sodium streetlights. They filled their days with mundane but precious routines, packing lunches, organizing playdates, and celebrating minor milestones in small ranch-style homes with peeling paint on the windowsills. When sudden fevers or unexpected respiratory issues struck, these parents rushed their infants through the sliding glass doors of the Bexar County Hospital, fully expecting their children to heal and return to their normal childhoods. They viewed the doctors and nurses not just as professionals, but as infallible guardians draped in white uniforms. The community placed absolute trust in the medical hierarchy, viewing the pediatric ward as the ultimate sanctuary for sick infants. These trusting families handed over their most precious loved ones, signing consent forms with trembling hands, relying on the vow that the hospital staff would do no harm. They paced the linoleum floors of the waiting rooms, drinking stale coffee from styrofoam cups, anchoring all their hopes on the medical team. There was no reason for them to suspect that the very hands entrusted to heal their children were harboring dark, calculated intentions. The bond between nurse and patient was considered sacred, an unspoken contract of care and protection. These families were left defenseless against a danger that wore the mask of a trusted caregiver. Operating within this environment of absolute trust was Jean Jones, a licensed vocational nurse who patrolled the pediatric ward with an intense and commanding presence. She was well known among the medical staff for her deep attachment to her patients and an uncanny, almost prophetic ability to anticipate sudden medical crises. To the casual observer, Jones appeared dedicated beyond measure, often lingering around the most fragile infants and demanding perfection from her peers. She wore the standard crisp white uniform and carried herself with the authority of a seasoned veteran, blending into the background of the high-stakes intensive care unit. Her superiors noted her aggressive advocacy for the children, interpreting her abrasive demeanor as a sign of passionate commitment to pediatric medicine. In reality, this constructed persona served as an impenetrable shield, allowing her to manipulate the environment without drawing suspicion. Jones thrived on the adrenaline of medical emergencies, craving the chaotic energy that erupted when a child suddenly coded and required massive intervention. She positioned herself at the center of the frantic activity, orchestrating the room, fetching supplies, and basking in the desperate attention of terrified parents and bewildered doctors. Her co-workers failed to recognize that her presence at the onset of these crises was not a coincidence of scheduling, but a deliberate pattern of control. She mastered the art of playing the hero, fabricating life or death situations to elevate her own status within the ward. The hospital hierarchy, blinded by the daily demands of saving lives, provided the perfect stage for her psychological theater. By late 1981, an alarming and statistically improbable shadow fell over the pediatric intensive care unit at Bexar County Hospital. Doctors and nurses began noticing a terrifying spike in sudden cardiac and respiratory emergencies among infants who were otherwise on the path to recovery. Children who were resting comfortably in their cribs, displaying stable vital signs on the glowing monitors, would crash within minutes. These sudden events required massive and traumatic emergency interventions, turning quiet afternoons into scenes of desperate, chaotic resuscitation. A chilling pattern emerged in the hospital logs, revealing that a disproportionate number of these life-threatening crises occurred exclusively during the afternoon and evening hours, specifically the 3 o'clock to 11 o'clock shift. The spatial layout of the ward meant that during these transition hours, staffing levels often fluctuated, leaving specific alcoves of the intensive care unit momentarily unsupervised. Infants suffering from minor ailments suddenly required ventilators, their small bodies enduring immense physical trauma for no apparent medical reason. The sheer volume of these coding events defied all known epidemiological models and pediatric statistics, leaving the medical staff unsettled. Senior doctors reviewed the charts repeatedly, searching for a hidden virus, a contaminated batch of intravenous fluids, or a faulty piece of medical equipment. Every logical avenue was explored, yet the unexplainable medical emergencies continued to ravage the ward with brutal consistency. The failure to recognize human foul play allowed the unseen predator to escalate their horrific game. The localized crisis reached a devastating tipping point on December 22, 1981, with the inexplicable death of 25-month-old Dorelia Rios. The toddler had been admitted to the hospital for relatively routine care, her family holding absolute faith in the institution to return her home safely. During the quiet hours of the evening shift, her condition deteriorated with unnatural speed, plunging into a catastrophic respiratory arrest that baffled the attending physicians. Despite the frantic efforts of the resuscitation team, the young girl met a permanent tragic end, leaving her parents shattered in the sterile hospital waiting room. Following this devastating loss, whispers of suspicion mounted in silence among the nursing staff who shared the floor. Observant co-workers began compiling unofficial lists, comparing notes in the break rooms away from the watchful eyes of hospital administration. It became evident that Nurse Jean Jones was invariably the first person discovering these crashing patients, often standing right beside the cribs just moments before the alarms triggered. The statistical reality was undeniable, as the mortality rate on her specific shift had skyrocketed far beyond any acceptable medical variance. Nurses noticed her strange, almost euphoric demeanor during the resuscitation attempts, a chilling contrast to the grim reality of the dying children. Despite these glaring red flags, the rigid hierarchy of the medical field discouraged junior nurses from directly accusing a senior staff member of deliberate harm. The silence of the staff created a deadly vacuum, permitting the perpetrator to continue stalking the polished hallways unchallenged. Faced with an undeniable cluster of infant deaths, the executive leadership at Bexar County Hospital committed an infuriating and catastrophic institutional failure. Instead of contacting law enforcement or halting operations to secure the intensive care unit, hospital administrators were paralyzed by the fear of public scandal and massive civil lawsuits. The administration prioritized the reputation of the teaching hospital over the safety of the vulnerable children entrusted to their care. Internal memorandums and hushed boardroom meetings replaced the urgent need for a thorough criminal investigation. The leadership utilized rigid bureaucratic protocols to mask the terrifying reality, choosing to dismantle the pediatric nursing team rather than expose a potential killer in their ranks. They initiated an administrative purge, deciding to reassign all the licensed vocational nurses from the intensive care unit to other departments under the guise of an organizational restructuring. To insulate the hospital from liability, the administration offered glowing letters of recommendation to the departing nurses, concealing the dark cloud of suspicion that hung over the ward. This calculated legal maneuver ensured that no official paper trail existed to warn future employers about the statistical anomalies surrounding Jean Jones. The system designed to protect patients was weaponized to protect the corporate entity, sacrificing accountability for the sake of public relations. This specific administrative cowardice represented a profound betrayal of the families who had lost their children. The hospital's desperate attempt to sweep the crisis under the rug provided the perpetrator with a pristine escape route. When presented with the mandatory reassignment to a lesser role within the hospital, Jean Jones defiantly declined the transfer. Armed with the deceptive professional references provided by the very administrators who suspected her, she officially resigned from Bexar County Hospital on March 17, 1982. By allowing her to walk out the sliding glass doors with an unblemished professional record, the hospital unleashed a lethal threat upon the broader medical community. She packed her crisp white uniforms and pristine credentials, leaving behind a trail of shattered families and silent, suspicious colleagues. The bureaucratic loophole had functioned exactly as the administrators hoped, clearing their liability but ensuring that justice remained out of reach for the victims. The lack of any formal police involvement meant there were no background checks or red flags to follow her into her next employment venture. This profound dereliction of duty by the Bexar County Hospital executives paved the way for the nightmare to migrate outward. Without a single word of warning to state licensing boards, the danger silently moved away from the bustling city of San Antonio. Armed with her lethal expertise and an insatiable need for control, she set her sights on the unsuspecting, quiet rural town of Kerrville. In the sweltering early summer of 1982, the threat migrated 65 miles northwest of San Antonio to Kerrville, a quiet community nestled in the rugged Texas hill country. The town featured wide sunlit streets lined with ancient oak trees, a place where doors remained unlocked and neighbors knew every face. On the edge of the residential district, Dr. Kathleen Holland prepared to open a brand new private pediatric clinic to serve the growing rural population. The clinic occupied a modest, single-story brick building set back from a 2-lane asphalt road, featuring a small reception area at the front and a long, narrow hallway leading to 3 pristine examination rooms at the back. A secure supply closet sat directly across from the examination rooms, requiring staff to walk only a few steps to retrieve essential medical materials. Dr. Holland needed a seasoned nurse to help manage the daily operations and handle the incoming flood of new pediatric patients. Reviewing a stack of applications, she found the pristine resume of Jean Jones, complete with glowing letters of recommendation provided by the Bexar County Hospital administrators. These official documents contained no hint of the devastating statistical anomalies or the secret internal purge that had removed the nurse from the intensive care unit. Relying on the absolute authority of the hospital credentials, Dr. Holland hired the veteran nurse to anchor her new practice. The catastrophic institutional cowardice of the city administrators had successfully transferred a lethal predator into a completely defenseless, trusting rural environment. Families began scheduling routine wellness checks, entirely unaware that the quiet brick building was about to transform into a theater of calculated medical terror. Almost immediately after the clinic opened its doors, a terrifying and unnatural wave of pediatric emergencies shattered the peace of the small town. Children arriving for minor ailments or standard developmental checkups began experiencing sudden, catastrophic respiratory failure while inside the enclosed examination rooms. The physical layout of the clinic meant that parents typically waited in the front reception area while the nurse took the child down the long hallway for preliminary vitals. During these brief windows of isolation, healthy infants would suddenly turn a terrifying shade of blue, their tiny chests freezing as they fought for air. Panic would erupt down the narrow corridor as Jones shouted for the doctor, initiating frantic resuscitation efforts on the examination tables. Over the course of just a few weeks, 8 different children suffered inexplicable respiratory emergencies while under the direct supervision of the new clinic nurse. The quiet brick building transformed into a chaotic trauma center, with local ambulances repeatedly wailing down the 2-lane road to transport crashing infants to the nearest emergency room. Jones positioned herself at the absolute center of every crisis, projecting an image of fierce competence while pumping the chests of the fragile victims. She commanded the small examination rooms, barking orders and basking in the terrified gratitude of the parents who believed she was fighting to save their children. The psychological torment inflicted on these rural families was profound, as they watched their perfectly healthy babies inexplicably slip toward the edge of life. Behind her mask of clinical devotion, the nurse orchestrated every single crisis to feed an insatiable hunger for absolute control. Faced with an impossible surge of crashing patients, Dr. Holland desperately sought a logical medical explanation for the unprecedented localized crisis. The sheer volume of sudden respiratory arrests in a rural outpatient setting defied all standard pediatric literature. A critical investigative dead end materialized when initial inquiries focused entirely on the strict biological protocols of standard childhood immunizations. Because many of the crashing infants had recently received routine inoculations, the medical team theorized that a contaminated batch of vaccines was triggering severe, delayed allergic reactions. Dr. Holland meticulously reviewed every lot number, contacting state health officials to report the alarming sequence of adverse medical events. The rigid structure of the medical supply chain required investigators to trace the manufacturing origins of the vaccines, a bureaucratic process that consumed crucial time and resources. While public health officials debated the safety of the specific immunization batches, the true human threat continued operating with total impunity inside the clinic walls. This specific medical misdirection provided the perpetrator with an impenetrable cover, allowing her to blame the sudden crises on a faulty pharmaceutical product. The focus on biological contamination completely blinded the clinic staff to the chilling reality that a trusted colleague was manually inducing the emergencies. The system trusted the uniform implicitly, assuming that any failure had to stem from a chemical defect rather than deliberate, calculated malice. As the investigation stalled in piles of pharmaceutical paperwork, the danger to the children of Kerrville intensified. Concurrently, 70 miles away in San Antonio, the dark secrets buried by the Bexar County Hospital Administration slowly began to surface. A dedicated medical investigator started pulling the raw, unedited data logs from the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit, determined to understand the quiet purge of the nursing staff. The investigator mapped the floor plan of the towering hospital, correlating the specific bed assignments of the deceased children with the daily shift rosters. Moving day by day through the fading ink of the hospital records, a chilling and undeniable pattern materialized on the desk. The data confirmed that an astronomical number of sudden cardiac and respiratory emergencies had occurred almost exclusively during the 3 o'clock to 11 o'clock evening shift. Furthermore, the records prove that Jean Jones was the primary nurse assigned to the exact alcove where the vast majority of these unexpected codes took place. The investigator uncovered the infuriating reality that hospital executives possessed this precise statistical data months earlier but chose to restructure the department rather than contact law enforcement. The rigid corporate protocols designed to shield the institution from civil liability had deliberately obscured the tracks of a serial predator. Building a criminal case required moving beyond statistical anomalies to find definitive physical evidence of intentional harm. The investigator began compiling a list of the children who had perished in the sterile hospital rooms, preparing to challenge a medical system that desperately wanted to keep its failures hidden. The primary obstacle facing the law enforcement teams was a profound forensic challenge centered on a highly specialized synthetic drug, based on the specific physiological presentation of the crashing infants. Medical experts suspected the use of succinylcholine, a powerful synthetic paralytic utilized in surgical settings. The drug is designed to completely paralyze the respiratory muscles within seconds, allowing anesthesiologists to insert breathing tubes, all while leaving the patient entirely conscious and aware of their suffocation. In the hands of a predator, it is an instrument of pure psychological and physical torture, locking a vulnerable child inside a paralyzed body. Detecting this specific chemical agent in a victim presented an almost impossible scientific hurdle for the criminal investigators. The human body contains enzymes that rapidly break down succinylcholine into natural chemical components within minutes of injection, leaving virtually no trace behind for standard autopsy screenings. Toxicologists across the state of Texas lacked the technology to identify the synthetic paralytic once it degraded into the surrounding tissue. The perpetrator understood this exact biological loophole, selecting a weapon that erased its own chemical signature before the chaotic resuscitation efforts even concluded. To prove the devastating crimes, investigators needed a revolutionary scientific breakthrough capable of finding the impossible within the fragile remains of the victims. The search for a testing method that could overcome this incredible forensic barrier became the absolute focus of the mounting investigation. The two separate timelines of tragedy finally collided when the San Antonio investigators learned about the ongoing pediatric nightmare unfolding in the Kerrville clinic. Recognizing the exact signature of the predator, law enforcement agencies realized they had to bypass the San Antonio hospital's compromised records and focus on the most recent victims. The investigation narrowed on the tragic case of 15-month-old Chelsea McClellan, whose sudden respiratory arrest on the clinic examination table perfectly matched the profile of a succinylcholine injection. The devastating reality set in that securing absolute proof would require disturbing the final resting place of the young victim. Detectives held agonizing meetings with the grieving McClellan family, explaining the horrific necessity of digging up their child to search for the invisible poison. Securing the legal authority required navigating a labyrinth of jurisdictional boundaries, drafting meticulous affidavits that connected the statistical anomalies in Bexar County to the isolated crisis in the Texas Hill Country. The investigators mapped out the precise logistical steps needed to transfer the fragile remains from the quiet Kerrville Cemetery to a secure state laboratory. They learned of a groundbreaking, highly experimental tissue test newly developed by forensic scientists in Sweden, offering a desperate glimmer of hope. The team meticulously prepared the legal and scientific groundwork, knowing that a single procedural error could render the delicate chemical evidence inadmissible in a court of law. The entire burden of justice now rested on a microscopic trace of synthetic poison hidden beneath the Texas soil. The physical geography of the Kerrville Clinic played a crucial role in unraveling the terrifying mystery. The main medication supply room stood locked at the extreme end of the narrow central corridor. A heavy solid wood door guarded the sensitive pharmaceutical inventory from public access. Dr. Kathleen Holland conducted a rigorous, routine audit of this locked cabinet in the early autumn of 1982. The official clinic inventory logs detailed the exact quantity of every single vial and syringe housed within the small space. She meticulously scanned the metal shelves holding the standard pediatric antibiotics and fever reducers. Her eyes eventually landed on a small plastic bin dedicated exclusively to specialized emergency drugs. A specific box containing vials of succinylcholine sat completely out of place. This powerful synthetic paralytic had absolutely no routine medical application in a standard rural outpatient setting. The clinic stocked the dangerous chemical strictly as a last resort for the most extreme catastrophic airway emergencies. Dr. Holland cross-referenced the physical bottle count against the handwritten ledger on her clipboard. A single glass vial of the lethal paralytic agent was undeniably missing from the secure stock. The discrepancy immediately triggered an overwhelming wave of dread in the physician. The physiological effects of the missing paralytic perfectly matched the exact terrifying symptoms displayed by the crashing infants. A desperate search for the missing pharmaceutical vial commenced immediately. Dr. Holland tore through the pristine clinical supply spaces with rising panic. She appended plastic wastebaskets and thoroughly scoured every corner of the 3 small examination rooms. Deep within a concealed trash receptacle near the central nursing station, she made a chilling discovery. The missing glass vial lay discarded among used alcohol swabs and crumpled paper syringe wrappers. The printed label clearly identified the empty container as the lethal synthetic paralytic. Dr. Holland examined the small glass bottle under the harsh glare of the fluorescent overhead lights. The thick rubber stopper at the top bore the unmistakable physical evidence of repeated tampering. A cluster of tiny, unauthorized puncture marks riddled the sealed entry point. Someone had covertly drawn the paralytic fluid into a hypodermic needle on multiple separate occasions. The chronological timeline of those illicit chemical withdrawals aligned perfectly with the inexplicable pediatric emergencies plaguing the rural clinic. Dr. Holland instantly confronted the horrifying truth about her veteran, highly recommended nurse. She terminated Jean Jones on the spot in the fall of 1982, demanding she leave the premises. The immediate firing completely severed the predator from her access to any vulnerable children. Dr. Holland locked the clinic doors behind the departing nurse and immediately alerted local law enforcement. Law enforcement agencies moved with desperate urgency to secure definitive physical evidence of the crimes. Texas investigators initiated the grim, agonizing process of gathering microscopic forensic proof. They descended upon a quiet, manicured cemetery in Kerrville in May of 1983. The burial plot of 15-month-old Chelsea McClellan sat beneath the deep shade of ancient, sprawling oak trees. Heavy earth-moving equipment shattered the silent peace of the rural morning air. The massive metal bucket stripped away the dark Texas topsoil layer by layer. Detectives stood shoulder to shoulder in a somber, secure perimeter around the active excavation site. The grieving McClellan family endured the unimaginable psychological torture of watching their infant pulled back from the earth. Forensic technicians eventually hoisted the small sealed casket from the muddy ground. They carefully broke the protective seals and transferred the fragile human remains to a specialized medical examiner facility. The investigators meticulously extracted vital tissue samples from the deceased infant under strictly controlled laboratory conditions. They packed the biological evidence into secure temperature-controlled transport containers. The physical chain of custody remained absolutely flawless at every single step of the transfer. These isolated tissue samples represented the absolute last remaining chance for the legal system to achieve moral justice. The crucial scientific breakthrough required to crack the case arrived from across the globe. Forensic experts operating in a Swedish laboratory had recently perfected a revolutionary toxicological testing method. The state toxicologists in Texas applied this unprecedented chemical analysis to the exhumed tissue of the infant. The complex laboratory process isolated the microscopic molecular remnants of phenylketonuria hidden deep within the decomposing biological material. The advanced testing equipment registered a definitive, undeniable positive result for the synthetic drug. The resulting forensic data proved beyond any scientific doubt that the child absorbed a massive dose of the paralytic agent. The infant did not suffer a natural medical tragedy or a spontaneous biological failure. A trusted medical professional intentionally injected the helpless child with a lethal chemical weapon. The formal revelation sent a massive shockwave of terror and betrayal through the entire Texas community. The dedicated nurse who played the frantic hero during the chaotic resuscitations was the actual architect of the suffering. Jean Jones fabricated the life-or-death emergencies simply to command attention and wield ultimate power over life and death. She wore the trusted mask of an ordinary caregiver while operating as a ruthless, calculated predator in plain sight. The undeniable scientific proof shattered her pristine medical camouflage forever. The invisible poison had finally been dragged into the glaring light of a criminal investigation. The massive machinery of the justice system pulled Jean Jones into a Texas courtroom in 1984. The state prosecutors presented a towering mountain of meticulous forensic evidence and damning statistical hospital data. The empaneled jury confronted the horrifying reality of a ruthless predator hiding behind a starched white uniform. They returned a swift, decisive verdict of guilty for the intentional fatal poisoning of Chelsea McClellan. The presiding judge handed down a massive 99-year prison sentence to ensure the public remained safe. Later that exact same year, aggressive prosecutors in Bexar County launched their own independent legal strike. They brought the former nurse to trial for severely injuring 4-week-old Rolando Santos. The infant had endured a near-fatal overdose of the powerful blood thinner heparin during a routine hospital shift. The second jury convicted the arrogant predator of this secondary atrocity without any hesitation. The court imposed an additional 60-year prison sentence for the brutal attack on the newborn. These two massive judicial mandates were ordered to run concurrently behind the heavy steel doors of the state penitentiary. The families of the victims finally watched the architect of their nightmares led away in heavy metal chains. The community universally believed the sheer length of these combined sentences guaranteed permanent, unshakable safety. The cell doors slammed shut on a reign of medical terror. For decades, a profound and lingering psychological pain tormented the families of the original San Antonio victims. The grieving parents lived with the infuriating knowledge that hospital administrators chose to shield the corporate institution rather than expose the crimes. No hospital executive ever faced criminal charges for facilitating the quiet transfer of a known lethal threat. This catastrophic systemic failure remained a festering, unhealed wound in the local community for over 30 years. A devastating and absurd legal loophole soon threatened to completely shatter the hard-won peace of the victims. The state of Texas operated under a 1977 mandatory release law specifically designed to ease severe prison crowding. This rigid administrative protocol dictated that state inmates earned automatic sentence reductions for maintaining good behavior behind bars. Bureaucrats tallied these administrative time credits without any regard for the specific violent nature of the original crimes. The deeply flawed mathematical formula created a terrifying, unalterable countdown to a catastrophic failure of justice. The legal structure mandated that Jean Jones would walk out of the prison gates as a completely free woman in March of 2018. The architect of the pediatric nightmare was on the verge of returning to civil society. The impending automatic release sparked a massive wave of public outrage and panic across the state. Victims organized aggressive campaigns and demanded that the legal system fix the catastrophic bureaucratic failure. The fight to keep the predator behind bars became a desperate race against the ticking clock. The local justice system absolutely refused to let the predator slip through the cracks of a flawed law. The Bexar County District Attorney Nitiko LaHood initiated a relentless and highly calculated legal siege